Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Tehillim Treasures, where we will plumb the beautiful depths and treasures of Tehillim from the very beginning of Tehillim to the end of David HaMelech's masterpiece. This episode is brought to you by Chazaq. Chazaq is an organization that helps public school children become Shomrei Torah mitzvahs, exposes them to the beauty of Torah and mitzvahs. Imagine for a moment you're standing in a store or you're walking down the street. You know the neighbor. You've known them for many years. You see their children riding their bike in the driveway. And you know they're Jewish. But now there's someone who can help them take the next step. And that is Chazaq, with countless programs after school and other wonderful programs to help expose them to the beauty of Yiddishkeit. If you know someone or know someone that knows someone that can help these children, then please email at psty@chazaq.org. This episode is also brought to you by Chickens for Shabbos. Chickens for Shabbos is exactly what it says it is, plus more. There are many people. There are Melamdim's children. There are Agunis. There are Grushis. There are families that do not have simple essentials for Shabbos and for life. Whatever they need, Chickens for Shabbos is there to provide. Please do your utmost to help in any way you can. Today we continue with chapter 131 and 132, Kuf Lamed Aleph and Kuf Lamed Beis, as we continue this magnificent journey through Sefer Tehillim in our Tehillim treasures. We're in the middle of the Shir HaMa'alos now, the 15 songs of ascents that were sung on the 15 steps of the Beis HaMikdash. And this kapitel is Shir HaMa'alos LeDavid, Hashem lo gava libi v'lo ramu einai v'lo hilachti b'gdolos u'v'nifla'os mimeni. David HaMelech is saying that even though he had accomplished so much in life, David HaMelech, the first king of the Jewish people, David HaMelech, the composer of Tehillim, David HaMelech, one of the greatest people to ever live, he says, Loi gava libi v'loi ramu einai. My heart is not proud, and my eyes are not haughty. Let's be clear, this is not David HaMelech who is suffering from a lack of self-esteem. He has a very healthy self-esteem. In fact, the name David tells us what his mission and what he stood for. David HaMelech has Dalid Vav Dalid, even though he's the Melech, the king of the Jewish people. Nevertheless, Dalid on one side and Dalid on another. Dalid is a lashon of Dal, poor, impoverished, not monetarily and financially impoverished, but in terms of how he projected himself and how he presented himself as somebody who was an ani, somebody who had accomplished nothing on his own, only through the siyata d'shmaya, to the help and the assistance of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he does not feel haughty, and he does not feel like a balgaiva. He doesn't feel like he's showing off. But a person needs to know that humility is the key not only for David HaMelech, but David HaMelech will one day give birth to, or his descendants will come from him, and they will be Mashiach. And Mashiach is described as an ani roichev al hachamor, a poor person, I believe it's a pasuk in Zechariah, who is riding on a donkey. Now, if you looked at the royal procession, and you would see the inauguration when King Charles was inaugurated, he was not a poor person riding on a donkey. Nothing of the sort. There was all the pomp and circumstance that you can possibly imagine. Billions of dollars was spent on the majesty, on making sure that everybody knew who the king was, and the king was propped up to the eyes of the entire world. David HaMelech is precisely the opposite. The ani, which is roichev al hachamor. There's a beautiful story. When the Chafetz Chaim was an old man, he did not stay only in the city of Radin, but he would make it a point to go to the other cities as well. And one time he came to Grodno. And they invited him to give some chizuk, to hear some musar. The Chafetz Chaim spent a few days in the city, and he spoke to them about Shabbos and other topics. One night, the Chafetz Chaim was asked to give a speech to the entire Kehillah. You can imagine, if the Chafetz Chaim is speaking, everybody in the town is coming to visit. Everybody's coming to hear the words of the Heilige Chafetz Chaim. And there, in the crowd, was a bacher. His name, Zeidel Epstein. Zeidel Epstein would become one day the great mashgiach of Yeshivas Torah Or. And he, at the time, was the Talmud of the Grodno Yeshiva, and therefore he was chosen to stand next to those who were carrying the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim couldn't stand Kemat anymore. They were lifting him. And as he's standing next to him, and they neared the destination, they came to a narrow alleyway. It was difficult for everybody to fit in the alleyway. And they could not all squeeze in at the same time into this alleyway, which would lead the Chafetz Chaim into the main shul. And as the Talmidim pushed the chair through, it was young Zeidel who was still able to stand there. There was nobody else there, because it was very, very narrow. And he was zoiche to hear the Chafetz Chaim mumbling to himself. And this is what he heard the Chafetz Chaim say. Yisrael Meir, right now you are here amongst people who consider you to be a somebody. And even so, it was not easy for you to make your way through the crowd. But what's going to happen in the next world? When the Malachei Chavola, the angels of destruction, are looking to tear you down. They're not going to let you pass by so easily. What are you going to do then? And Zeidel listened to the Chafetz Chaim and give himself musar and more musar, because he didn't want the kavod to affect him. He wanted to deflect the kavod so that he was able to remain humble and not let any of the kavod get to his head. Chafetz Chaim was the Kohen Gadol of Klal Yisrael. Not literally, but figuratively, certainly. And yet, he understood exactly who he was and what his place in this world was. It shouldn't take much effort from us to be humble. We don't have all that much to brag about. But we must know that being humble is the key to being a servant of Hashem. And now we continue on to the next chapter, Kapitel Kuf Lamed Beis. And Shir Amalei Zechor Hashem LeDavid Eis Kol Unusai. In the 132nd chapter of Tehillim, David HaMelech promises, I am not going to sleep Ad Emtza Makoim Makoim Lashem. The great Dedi had that beautiful niggin. Until I find a place for Hashem. Hey, Mishkenois, Lavir Yaakov. He wanted to find a dwelling place for Hashem. And he promised himself, I will not rest until I find a place for Hashem to dwell. And the promise is one for the ages. You know, Moshe Eisman from Yeshivas Ner Yisrael, he should have a refuah shleima. He didn't have a couch in his house. You know why? Because a couch is a place to relax. And this world is not meant for relaxing. This world is meant for doing, for accomplishing. Who has time to rest? Adem tzamakim Hashem. Once Hashem is resting, once the Shekhinah is resting, sure. Then, go ahead, treat yourself to a little cat nap. Full disclosure, I take a cat nap every day. But this is the ideal that David HaMelech has given us. That we can't rest. We have to do in this world. And we have to make room for Hashem, not only in our hearts, but in our homes, in our lives, we have to constantly realize that Hashem takes up a large place in our existence. And I'd like to share with you a story. It's a beautiful story, and it's a powerful story. There's a Yid by the name of Rabbi Yisrael. He worked for an organization called Lev Shoimeya. Lev Shoimeya was helping Yeshiva Bachrim, and Rabbi Yisrael received a phone call from a father. His son was the oldest Bachar in Yeshiva, and the Yeshiva determined that he was doing something wrong, and they decided they're going to throw him out of the Yeshiva. Now, this was a real problem because he was an older Bachar, and how's he going to find the shidduch now? How's he possibly going to find the shidduch? He's getting thrown out of a yeshiva. Not only that, he had been dating, he was on the verge of getting engaged, and now he's going to be thrown out of yeshiva? Not only that, the Kala's brother learned in the same yeshiva. It would stir the shidduch. There's no shaila would break the shidduch. And he called on Rabbi Yisrael to help him. Rabbi Yisrael called the Rosh Yeshiva and he told him about the situation, and the Rosh Yeshiva listened, and he agreed that it's going to be terribly detrimental to the shidduch. And he told Rabbi Yisrael that he would work things out for the Bachar, but he would first have to make sure that the rest of the Anhola was on board on his decision to keep this young man in yeshiva. Rabbi Yisrael boarded a bus from Bnei Brak to Yerushalayim, and he decided to utilize his time to make some phone calls. Speaking quietly on the phone, the fellow who was sitting next to him, was not a religious person, started to get very, very agitated, very, very upset with him. And he began to scream at him, and he told him, "Put away your phone, you're disturbing the bus ride." Now, the other people on the bus, also no friends of the Frum, they also started to bandwagon. They also started to scream at him. And before you knew it, the bus driver saw that there's a tremendous commotion on the bus. And he saw you can't take chances. There's commotion on the bus. He pulled over to the side of the road. And when he heard the story, he told Rabbi Yisrael, "Listen, there's no talking on the phone loudly." Think about how absurd it is. I mean, who doesn't talk on the phone? Everybody talks on the phone. Nevertheless, they wanted to get onto Rabbi Yisrael's case. Rabbi Yisrael was mortified. He was trying to help someone, and now his hands were tied. He knew there was a gross overreaction, but there was nothing he could do. He put his phone down, and he decided he's not going to answer it for the next 45 minutes. Now here he is. He's trying to make sure that this Bach is in yeshiva. He's trying to call the people on the rest of the Anhala. And, well, 45 minutes later, Rabbi Yisrael's phone rings. It's mamish toward the end. And he decided, you know what, it's okay now. Now I'll answer the phone. But as soon as he pulled it out of his pocket, his neighbor starts glaring at him as if he had done something horrifically wrong. He looks at the caller ID and he sees that the Rosh Yeshiva was calling him back. So he answers the phone and he tells the Rosh Yeshiva, "Listen, I'm not able to talk now." But before he hung up, the Rosh Yeshiva says to him, "Listen, I want you to know I cleared it with Dan Holla and it's going to be okay." Yisrael was thrilled. And he decided, you know what? He doesn't want to wait one more second. He's calling this Bachar to make sure that he knows he's back in yeshiva. The bus all of a sudden exploded. Not Chas v'Shalom literally, but everybody on the bus started screaming and yelling. And there's nothing he could do. But he felt he asked to call the boy's father. And he picks up the phone to call the father, and he turns around. And then he realized the man sitting next to him was the father. The man who had gotten agitated with him was the father. He was trying to help him the whole time. Go figure. You know, sometimes we think that, you know, we're going to give somebody a hard time. We're going to be intolerant. Rav Meilech Biederman tells us that a person has to remember that sometimes the person that we're trying to give a hard time to is the person that's really helping us. The Ribbono Shel Olam has his Shechina. He's trying to rest here. And to be honest with you, our behavior is giving the Ribbono Shel Olam a hard time. If only we would have the Shechina amongst us, we wouldn't have to be busy with all the troubles, with all the problems that we have. Find the place for Hashem in your heart, and you'll never regret it. Until next time, sei gesund.